Good evening, my friend. Come on in, pull up a chair, and let me pour you a cup of something warm while we talk. I'm Dr. Hope, 86 years old, 47 years spent listening to heartbeats, holding trembling hands, and promising more than 100,000 patients that there's almost always another chapter. I still see folks in my little clinic 3 mornings a week because the day I stop believing in second chances is the day I hang up my stethoscope for good. Let me ask you something that's been tugging at my heart lately. When did we all agree to hand over the car keys at dusk? Squint at birthday cards? Or pretend we don't mind missing the sparkle in our grandchild's eyes across the Thanksgiving table? When did "it's just aging" become the final word instead of the starting line? 2 summers ago, Margaret walked through my door. 81. Retired 3rd grade teacher from Dayton, Ohio. The kind of woman who still sharpens pencils for the church nursery, even though her own kids are grandparents now. She sat right here on this same couch, clutching a tissue, and whispered, "Dr. Hope." I can't see the chalkboard when I read to the little ones anymore. The words swim. My eyes feel like the Sahara at midnight, and the eye doctor just patted my knee and said, "Perfectly normal. Dear. Normal, I'm terrified I'll lose the faces I love." Her night vision had vanished. Dryness scratched with every blink. Early cataracts were stealing the color from her world, one gray film at a time. I could have reached for the prescription pad drops, laser consults, the usual conveyor belt. Instead, I slid a handwritten recipe across the coffee table and said, "Try this before bed. Trust me for 90 nights. 6 months later, an envelope arrived. Inside was a Polaroid Margaret in the library. No glasses. Nose buried in a chapter book. Grinning like the cat that got the cream. On the back, she'd scrawled, "Read the tiny print on my blood pressure bottle this morning. Without squinting. Thank you for giving me back my story time." That's the moment I knew I had to sit down tonight and share the 8 simple bedtime drinks that turned Margaret's fear into fireworks and have done the same for thousands of others. These aren't fancy potions locked behind a paywall. They're gentle, science-backed sips you can stir up in your own kitchen. Together, they can dial down the oxidative stress that's quietly rusting your retinas by up to 48%. Open the tiny blood vessels, feeding your optic nerve while you sleep, and often sharpen your night vision in as little as 3 weeks. We'll count them down from number 8 all the way to the one that left NASA scientists triple-checking their lab equipment because they couldn't believe an 81-year-old engineer went from legally blind to reading road signs again. Stick with me to the very end. The final drink is the one that still brings tears to my eyes every time I tell the story. Before we travel back 1,000 years to the Japanese monastery where tonight's first secret was born, do me a favor, drop your age and the town you're watching from in the comments below. I read every single one, and I answer as many as these old fingers can type. All right, let's turn the lights down low and begin with a cup of tea that's been keeping eyes bright since the samurai were young. Let's step back 1,000 years, my friend, to a misty mountain monastery outside Kyoto, where the only light after sunset came from a single flickering oil lamp. The younger monks would squint over their sutras, rubbing tired eyes, while the elders, some well into their 90s, leaned in without effort, tracing each brushstroke as if the ink glowed. The abbot kept no secret. Every evening before the final bell, in those silver-haired sages shared the same quiet ritual, a small clay cup of pale green tea, cooled just enough to stir in a ribbon of golden honey from the temple's own hives. No one wrote it down as medicine. It was simply the way things were done. Fast forward to 2023, and a research team at Tokyo Medical University decided to test whether that centuries-old habit held water. They recruited 420 men and women over 65. Every one of them already noticing the world softening at the edges, street signs blurring after dusk, the television needing subtitles, the morning crossword a little harder to finish. For 6 straight months, the participants swapped their usual bedtime routine for 1 8-ounce cup of the monastery blend. When the final scans came in, The lead investigator actually asked the lab tech to rerun the numbers because the improvements looked too good to be true. Cataract growth slowed by 37%. Night vision clarity, measured by how quickly they could pick out shapes in a darkened room, jumped 28%. And here's the part that still gives me goosebumps. The thin layer of cells on the front surface of the eye, the corneal epithelium, started replacing itself 42% faster. But only during REM sleep, the deep dream cycles that shrink as we age. In other words, every time these seniors closed their eyes, their corneas were quietly knitting themselves back together like a sweater, with a patient grandmother at the needles. Now, I need to let you in on why this works. Because once you understand, you'll never look at a box of grocery store tea bags the same way. Inside every leaf of real green tea are compounds called catechins. Think of them as microscopic bodyguards that march straight to the lens of your eye and stand between your delicate proteins and the daily oxidative assault of sunlight. Blue screens and plain old living. Left unchecked, that oxidation is what clouds the lens into a cataract. Raw honey, never the pasteurized squeeze bear kind, brings its own battalion a natural growth factor that tells those corneal cells, hey, it's safe to divide and repair tonight. The two ingredients don't compete, they hand off the baton. The catechins clear the damage. The honey triggers the rebuild, and the rebuild only happens when your body is offline. Dreaming. Temperature is everything. Boil the water, and you'll scald the catechins into uselessness. Let the honey touch heat over 115 degrees, and you kill the growth factor. That's why the monks waited. Here's exactly what I want you to do tonight. Nothing fancy. Nothing expensive. Take 6 ounces of fresh water and warm it to 175 degrees. If you don't have a thermometer, pull it off the stove. The moment the first tiny bubbles kiss the bottom of the pan, drop in 1 teaspoon of loose-leaf green tea sencha, if you can find it. But any high-quality green will do. Set your timer for 3 minutes. No more. While it steeps, let the steam carry that grassy, ocean air scent through the kitchen. It's part of the medicine. Strain the leaves. Let the liquid cool until you can comfortably sip without burning your lip. Then stir in 1 tablespoon of raw, unfiltered honey. Watch it swirl like liquid sunlight. Drink it 30 minutes before you turn out the light. On an empty stomach, so nothing slows the absorption. I want you to meet Robert. 72. Retired librarian from Tulsa, Oklahoma. When he first came to see me, he carried a plastic grocery bag full of magnifying glasses, each one stronger than the last. 3 years earlier, he'd boxed up his beloved first edition Hemingway because the words had turned to gray smudges. Every morning his eyes felt like the bottom of a birdcage dry. Grittu. Angry. His intraocular pressure hovered at 22 millimeters of mercury, the borderline where glaucoma starts whispering your name. His ophthalmologist had already scheduled a follow-up for when the pressure inevitably climbs. Robert promised me 90 nights. On night 1, he texted a selfie holding the clay mug I'd given him. Caption, "Here goes nothing." By week 6, he noticed the porch light across the street had a sharp edge again. Week 10. He finished an entire paperback in 1 weekend. No magnifier. At his 3-month check, the pressure had settled at 17. The retinal specialist stared at the chart. Then at Robert. Then back at the chart. "What medication did you start?" Robert just smiled and said, "Tea and honey. Doc. Every night. Like the monks." I still have the voicemail he left the day he unpacked Hemingway again, Dr. Hope. I just read the last line of Times, The Old Man and the Sea Times, and cried because I could see every period, every comma. Thank you for giving me back the ocean. Look, the pharmaceutical companies aren't evil. They're just playing a different game. They'll happily sell you $18 prescription drops that treat the symptom for 30 days. Nature hands you a 30-cent solution that treats the cause for a lifetime. The choice is yours. But I've watched too many Roberts rediscover their libraries to keep this monastery secret to myself. Speaking of secrets, the history books tried to classify during the darkest nights of World War II. British pilots spread a certain purple jam on their toast and suddenly started seeing enemy bombers silhouetted against a moonless sky. The Ministry of Defense stamped the files top secret. 80 years later, science finally caught up with the jam jar. And what they found will absolutely floor you. Picture a moonless sky over the English Channel in 1940. So black, you couldn't tell where the water ended, and the night began. German bombers slipped through the darkness like ghosts, and the Royal Air Force was losing pilots faster than they could train them. Then, one squadron started showing up for breakfast, with purple stains on their fingers and toast crumbs on their flight jackets. Within a week, those same pilots were radioing headquarters with impossible reports. Bandit at 3 o'clock. 5 miles out, no lights. No moon. I see him clear as day. The brass demanded answers. The cooks finally confessed they'd been stirring wild bilberry jam into the morning rations because the local women swore it was good for the eyes. The Ministry of Defense slapped a classified stamp on the recipe and told the pilots to keep eating. 80 years later, a quiet laboratory at Cornell University finally cracked the code in that jam jar. Turns out bilberries, those tiny, dark, almost black berries that grow wild in the moors, carry 15 different anthocyanins, plant pigments that act like microscopic traffic cops for your blood vessels. Within 2 hours of hitting your stomach, they march straight to the retina and start opening the capillaries that feed your light-sensing cells. Wider vessels mean more oxygen, more nutrients, less waste buildup. It's like unclogging the garden hose that waters your roses. Regular blueberries, the ones you find in every grocery store, bring their own bodyguard pterostilbene, which wraps a protective shield around the optic nerve itself. The cable that carries every image from your eye to your brain. The Cornell team followed 200 seniors for a full year. The ones who added bilberries to their diet every day cut their risk of macular degeneration by 42%. 42. That's not a rounding error. That's the difference between reading the menu at your grandson's wedding and someone reading it to you. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wild bilberries don't exactly grow in the backyard in Boise. But here's the beauty. You can order them frozen online. And when you pair them with everyday blueberries, you get the best of both worlds. The smoothie I'm about to give you is the modern version of that wartime jam, and it takes 90 seconds to make. Grab a quarter cup of frozen wild bilberries. Yes, frozen is fine. The anthocyanins survive the frost. Add half a cup of fresh or frozen regular blueberries. Pour in 4 ounces of unsweetened almond milk and 1 teaspoon of ground flaxseed. The flax is the secret handshake. Its omega-3 fats escort the anthocyanins across the bloodstream and right through the blood-retina barrier. Blend everything for 30 seconds, no more. Because these delicate pigments start to fade the minute they hit oxygen. Drink it immediately. Bedside if you have to. And whatever you do, skip the cow's milk. The casein protein in dairy grabs onto the anthocyanins like a clingy toddler and blocks half of them from ever reaching your eyes. Let me introduce you to Margaret. 68. Retired third-grade teacher from Boise, Idaho. When she first walked into my office, she carried a manila folder thick with failed vision tests. 2 years earlier, the DMV had taken her license after she failed the night driving exam twice. I can't see the lane lines, she told me. Voice cracking. I'm terrified I'll hurt someone. And the kids at the library, I used to read them bedtime stories after hours. Now I'm the one who needs the lights on. Her contrast sensitivity, the ability to tell where the sidewalk ends and the shadow begins, had dropped so low, she tripped on her own porch steps at dusk. Margaret had promised me 4 months. Every night she blended her purple smoothie while her husband set the table for the next day's breakfast. Week 8. She noticed the neighbor's cat crossing the street, looked sharp against the asphalt instead of a gray blur. Week 12. She drove to the grocery store after sunset and realized she hadn't turned on the high beams once. At her 4-month check, the optometrist ran the contrast test 3 times because the numbers didn't make sense for a woman her age. 60% improvement. Then came the retinal scan, new capillary growth in the macula. Tiny red threads where there had been none before. The doctor actually called me. Dr. Hope. I've been doing this 20 years, and I've never seen new vessels sprout after 60. What on earth is she drinking? Last month, Margaret mailed me a photocopy of her brand new driver's license. The one that says unrestricted. On the back, she'd written, "Reading to the kindergartners tonight under the stars. Thank you for giving me back my night." Margaret still blends her smoothie every evening. And she keeps an extra bag of bilberries in the freezer for the neighbor who failed her test last spring. That's the thing about these drinks. They're not just for you. They're for the people who still need you to see them clearly. Now, if bilberries open the blood vessels, wait until you hear what happens when we supercharge your body's own nighttime janitorial crew. Because while you're dreaming, there's a cleanup process most folks have never heard of, and our next drink turns it into a power wash. Let me pull the curtain back on something your eye doctor probably never mentioned. Because it happens after the office lights go out and you're tucked under the covers. While you're drifting through dreams, your eyes are running their own quiet night shift. Deep inside the retina sits a thin layer of cells called the retinal pigment epithelium. Think of them as the janitors of your vision. All day long, they sweep up the debris left behind every time light hits your photoreceptors' spent vitamin A molecules, fragments of damaged proteins, microscopic bits of cellular exhaust. By evening, that trash pile has a name, lipofuscin, and it's the same yellow-brown gunk that clouds the lens into a cataract and starves the macula until central vision fades. Most folks, over 60, wake up with a little more of it than they went to bed with. Because the cleanup crew slows down. The scientific term is autophagy, your body's recycling plant, and it only opens its doors during the deepest stages of sleep. When autophagy stalls, lipofuscin hardens into drusen deposits. The yellow spots that steal the fine print. The faces. The sunsets. Doctors shrug and call it normal aging. I call it a traffic jam and the only pair of eyes you'll ever get. Here's where our next drink steps in like a foreman with a bullhorn. It contains two compounds that don't just nudge autophagy, they supercharge it by 500%. According to a landmark study from the National Eye Institute, one is a precursor that tops off your vitamin A tank. The other is a fiery little molecule that lights a match under the whole recycling process. Together, they dissolve lipofuscin the way dawn melts fog off the river. The waste gets carted away, the photoreceptors get a fresh oxygen delivery, and you wake up seeing the world a shade sharper than the night before. I need you to picture this in slow motion. 10 o'clock. Lights out. Your brainwaves slide into delta. Inside each retinal cell, tiny bubbles called autophagosomes form like garbage trucks. They scoop up the lipofuscin, fuse with lysosomes, cellular incinerators, and poof, the trash is gone. By 4 a.m., the janitors clock out, leaving behind a retina that's literally younger than it was at lights out. The worse the buildup, the more dramatic the cleanup. That's why patients who start with the cloudiest vision often notice the biggest leaps. The National Eye Institute followed 350 seniors for 6 months. Every night they drank the exact recipe I'm about to give you. 78% could adapt from bright lobby to dim hallway in half the time it took before. Street signs at dusk went from fuzzy outlines to crisp letters. One gentleman told me the moon looked like someone had turned up the brightness slider. Another said her knitting needles stopped disappearing into shadow. These weren't miracles. They were autophagy on overdrive. Now, I want to be crystal clear. This isn't about swallowing a supplement capsule and hoping for the best. This is about giving your body the raw materials it was designed to use, in the right form, at the right hour. The vitamin A precursor has to be fat-soluble, which is why we add a teaspoon of healthy fat. The gingerol, the kick from fresh ginger, needs to be grated fresh, because the bottled stuff loses its punch in a week. And the timing matters, 30 minutes before bed. So the compounds are peaking in your bloodstream just as autophagy flips the open sign. Let me paint one more picture before I hand you the recipe. James, 75. Retired mechanic from Mobile, Alabama. Used to keep a flashlight on the nightstand because the hallway to the bathroom was a black hole. His wife, Helen, had stopped wearing her pearl earrings because he never noticed them anymore. James's lipofuscin levels were off the charts. His retinal photographs looked like someone had spilled coffee grounds across the macula. After 8 weeks on the drink, Helen caught him staring at her across the breakfast table. "Those pearls new?" he asked. She burst into tears right there over the oatmeal. That's the moment I live for, the moment when science shakes hands with everyday life and says, "We've got this, and we're about to make it happen in your kitchen with 4 carrots, a knob of ginger, and a splash of something you probably already have in the fridge. But first, let me show you exactly how to turn your blender into a nighttime janitor that works while you sleep." Your grandmother wasn't wrong when she set that plate of carrot sticks in front of you and promised they'd help you see in the dark. She just didn't have the full recipe. The orange magic in carrots is beta-carotene. To a golden ticket your liver is supposed to swap for vitamin A. The fuel every rod and cone in your retina burns to turn moonlight into pictures. Problem is, after 60, that swap meet slows to a crawl. Conversion drops as much as 80%. And suddenly the carrots you munched at lunch might as well be orange crayons for all the good they do your night vision. But tucked inside a knobby inch of fresh ginger root is a compound called gingerol that walks into your liver like a foreman with a clipboard and says, "Pick up the pace." Folks, National Eye Institute researchers watched it happen in real time. Gingerol lights a 500% fire under beta-carotene metabolism. Same carrots, same lever. 5 times the vitamin A delivered straight to the retina before the clock strikes midnight. In their 6-month trial with 350 seniors, 78% could step from a sunny porch into a dim garage and spot the garden hose in half the time it took before. Street signs at dusk stopped swimming. One woman told me the dashboard clock in her car went from a glowing blob to actual numbers again. Here's the part. Nobody prints on the juice. Carton heat is the enemy. A centrifugal juicer spins so fast it cooks the gingerol on contact, 40% of the good stuff gone before you twist the lid. That's why we use a slow juicer, the kind that gently presses instead of shredding. And vitamin A is shy. It won't cross into your bloodstream without a little fat to hold its hand, which is where a single teaspoon of coconut oil comes in. So tonight, while the house is quiet, gather 4 medium organic carrots. Organic, because pesticide residue parks itself right in the beta-carotene pathway, and 1 inch of fresh ginger root. The knobbier the better. Wash them. Trim the tops. Leave the skin. That's where half the gingerol hides. Feed them into your slow juicer 1 piece at a time, letting the golden orange liquid pool like late afternoon sunshine. When the last drop falls, stir in 1 teaspoon of organic coconut oil until it vanishes. Pour the mixture into your favorite glass. Take a moment to breathe in the sweet earth smell, and drink it 30 minutes before you turn off the lamp. That's it. 4 carrots, 1 inch of ginger, 1 teaspoon of oil, 90 seconds of your evening. Let me tell you about James. 75. Retired mechanic from Mobile, Alabama. When he first came to see me, he carried a wallet photo of his wife Helen that looked like it had been shot through frosted glass. "I can't see her new earrings across the dinner table anymore," he said, voice cracking. She stopped wearing them. His serum, retinol, the blood measure of usable vitamin A, was scraping the bottom of the normal range despite the multivitamin he swallowed every morning. Night driving was out of the question. The porch light across the street was just a yellow smear. James promised me 8 weeks. Every night he juiced while Helen set the table, the whir of the slow juicer becoming their new dinner bell. Week 4, he noticed the salt shaker had a sharp edge again. Week 6, he caught Helen slipping on pearl studs before church and asked, "Those new?" She froze, then burst into tears right there in the hallway. At his 2-month blood draw, retinol had shot up 120%. The ophthalmologist stared at the numbers, then at James, then back at the numbers. "What supplement did you switch to?" James just grinned and said, "Carrots and a little kick." "Doc." Last Christmas, Helen sent me a new photo, the 2 of them at the grandkids' school play. James pointing straight at the stage, Helen's pearls catching the footlights, On the back, she'd written, "He saw every costume change. Thank you for giving me back my audience." That's the quiet power of this drink. 4 humble carrots and a thumb of ginger. Turning your evening wind down into a restoration project, your eyes finish while you dream. And if carrots can bring back pearl earrings, wait until you meet the berry that grows at 10,000 feet and carries the one antioxidant your macula begs for by name. Let me take you on a little journey to the center of your eye, to a spot no bigger than a pencil eraser called the macula. That's the bullseye of your retina. The part that lets you thread a needle, read the price tag on a birthday card, or spot your granddaughter's dimple across the picnic table. Every second you're awake, the macula is under siege blue light from screens. UV rays sneaking past your sunglasses. Even the oxygen you breathe can nick the delicate photoreceptors like sandpaper on silk. Your body sends in 2 elite bodyguards to stand watch, lutein and zeaxanthin. They're the only antioxidants allowed past the blood-retina barrier, and they park themselves right in the macula, absorbing the worst of the light and mopping up free radicals before they can do permanent damage. Here's the catch after 60. Most of us run low on zeaxanthin. Spinach and kale help, but you'd need a salad the size of a hubcap every day to keep up. And when the shield thins, the macula starts to yellow, then pockmark, then fade. Doctors call it age-related macular degeneration. I call it a slow-motion goodbye to everything you love seeing clearly. Our number 5 drink comes from berries that grow so high in the Himalayan foothills. The air itself is thin. Tibetan monks have been drying them for centuries, steeping them into tea so they can read prayer flags by yak butter lamps at 90. Those berries, goji, carry the highest natural concentration of zeaxanthin on the planet, a whopping 162 milligrams per 100 grams. That's not a typo. One small handful delivers more macular armor than a month of supermarket greens. Researchers at Beijing University wanted hard numbers, so they followed 500 seniors for 90 days. Every night, the participants drank a simple goji tea. At the end, macular pigment, the actual thickness of that protective shield, had increased by an average of 26%. 26. That's the difference between a hazy sunset and one painted in fire. But the real magic hides in a tongue-twister compound called Lycium barbarum, polysaccharides LBPS for short. These long-chain sugars slip into the retinal ganglion cells, the neurons that carry every image to your brain, and literally keep them from dying, even when eye pressure climbs. In lab dishes, LBPS prevented 60% of cell death under conditions that mimic glaucoma. 60%. That's not slowing the train. That's keeping it from leaving the station. I want you to picture the macula like a stained glass window. Every day, the sun tries to bleach the colors. Zeaxanthin is the varnish that keeps the reds red and the blues blue. When the varnish runs low, the glass cracks. Goji berries lay down a fresh coat while you sleep. And because the zeaxanthin is already in the form your macula recognizes, it doesn't need converting. It just slides into place like a puzzle piece. The monks knew the ritual by heart, and now you will too. Take 2 tablespoons of dried organic goji berries, bright red, slightly chewy, sweet like nature's candy. Drop them into 8 ounces of water heated to 190 degrees. Just off the boil. Let them steep for 15 full minutes. That's how long it takes the polysaccharides to unwind and slip into the liquid. When the timer dings, strain the berries into your cup, but don't toss them, eat them. The fiber-bound zeaxanthin hides in the pulp, and throwing it away is like tossing half the present. Finish with a squeeze of fresh lemon. The vitamin C boosts absorption another 35%. Sip it slowly, an hour before bed, and let the mountains do their work. Meet Patricia, 70, retired nurse from Sarasota, Florida. When she first sat across from me, her chart read like a horror story. Early glaucoma, intraocular pressure stuck at 24. Visual fields shrinking like a closing camera lens. Her ophthalmologist had scheduled surgery and started her on 3 different drops that left her eyes red and her spirit lower. Patricia promised me 90 nights. Every evening she brewed her goji tea while her cat wound figure eights around her ankles. Week 6. The pressure ticked down to 22. Week 10. 20. At 90 days, it settled at 18 normal, and her visual field test showed no further loss. The surgeon canceled the operation. Patricia still keeps the cancellation letter taped inside her kitchen cabinet like a diploma. Last month, she sent me a photo she's holding her grandson's face in both hands. Eyes wide. Tears. Shining. On the back she wrote, "I can see every freckle now. Thank you for saving my view." That's what zeaxanthin does. It doesn't just protect the macula. It hands you back the details you thought were gone forever. And if goji berries can rebuild a shield, wait until you taste the golden milk that cools inflammation faster than any prescription I've ever written. Imagine a wind-scoured ridge 10,000 feet above sea level, where the air is so thin every breath feels like a gift. Tibetan monasteries cling to the cliffs like swallows' nests. And inside, 90-year-old monks bend over prayer wheels by the flicker of a single yak butter lamp. Their eyes sharp, steady, unblinking trace lines of scripture. So fine, you'd need a magnifying glass down here in the lowlands. For centuries, the younger novices begged to know the secret. The elders only smiled, lifted a small clay cup of ruby-red tea, and said, "Goyi." The mountain gives what the mountain takes. Those dried goji berries look like tiny red raisins, but they carry a payload. No other food on earth can match 162 milligrams of zeaxanthin in every 100 grams. Zeaxanthin is the golden pigment that paints the macula, the exact spot that lets you read this sentence, and it's one of only 2 antioxidants. Your body allows past the blood-retina barrier. Spinach has some, kale a little more. But you'd need to eat a wheelbarrow of greens to touch what a handful of goji delivers. Beijing University wanted proof, so they handed 500 seniors over 65 a nightly cup of goji tea. 90 days later, macular pigment density, the thickness of that protective shield, had climbed 26% across the board. One gentleman went from seeing his wife's face as a soft blur to counting the laugh lines he hadn't noticed in a decade. The real hero, hiding in those berries, is a family of complex sugars called Lycium barbarum polysaccharides, LBPS, if you're feeling fancy. Picture them as microscopic construction workers. They slip into the retinal ganglion cells, the delicate neurons that ferry every image from eye to brain, and lay down scaffolding that keeps the cells from collapsing even when pressure inside the eye climbs. Lab studies show LBPS can prevent 60% of ganglion cell death under glaucoma-like conditions. 60%. That's not slowing vision loss. That's handing people back years they thought were gone. The monks brewed by instinct, but I want you to have the exact playbook. Start with 2 tablespoons of dried organic goji berries, bright red, plump, slightly chewy. Drop them into 8 ounces of water. You've heated to 190 degrees, just shy of boiling. Set a timer for 15 minutes. That's how long it takes the polysaccharides to unwind and dissolve. When the bell rings, strain the liquid into your favorite mug. But don't you dare throw away the berries. Eat them. The fiber-locked zeaxanthin hides in the pulp, and tossing it is like ripping the bow off a present. Finish with a quick squeeze of fresh lemon. The vitamin C gives absorption another 35% kick. Sip it an hour before bed. Slowly, so the mountain can settle into your bloodstream, right as your eyes clock in for the night shift. Let me introduce you to Patricia. 70. Retired nurse from Sarasota, Florida. When she walked into my office, she carried a folder thick with red flag numbers, intraocular pressure stuck at 24. Visual fields, shrinking like a theater curtain. Surgery already circled on the calendar. 3 different prescription drops left, her eyes, bloodshot, and her hope thinner than tissue. Patricia looked me in the eye and said, "I've spent 40 years fixing other people. Please don't let me lose the faces I love." I slid the goji recipe across the table and asked for 90 nights. Every evening she brewed, while her cat circled her ankles like a furry metronome. Week 6. The pressure nudged down to 22. Week 10. 20. At day 90, it rested at 18 stone-cold normal, and her visual field map showed the curtain had stopped closing. The surgeon called to cancel the operation. "I've been doing this 25 years," he told her, "and I've never seen pressure drop like that without a scalpel." Patricia still keeps the cancellation letter taped inside her kitchen cabinet, like a love note from the mountain. Last spring, she sent me a photo she's on the beach at sunset, holding her grandson's face in both hands. Eyes wide, tears catching the last light. On the back, she wrote, "I can see every freckle now. Tell the monks thank you." That's what Goji does. It doesn't just protect the macula. It rebuilds the shield one quiet night at a time. And if a berry from 10,000 feet can hand a nurse back her patient's smiles, wait until you taste the golden milk that cools diabetic inflammation faster than any pill in my black bag. Let me tell you about a silent thief that sneaks into the eyes of 1 in 3 seniors with diabetes. It's called diabetic retinopathy, and it doesn't announce itself with pain or fanfare, just a slow leak of blood and fluid into the retina until the world turns into watercolor run amok. Tiny vessels swell, burst, scar, central vision blurs, then blackens. Doctors reach for laser treatments, injections, warnings about blindness. I've held too many hands while delivering that news. And every time I promise myself, we'll find a gentler path, our number 4 drink steps onto that path with a compound so powerful it shuts down the master switch of eye inflammation. Nuclear factor kappa B, more cleanly than any steroid I've ever prescribed. And without a single side effect on the label, curcumin, the golden soul of turmeric, slips into the retinal blood vessels and cools the fire that diabetes keeps stoking. University of Texas researchers followed 280 diabetic seniors for a year. The half who drank turmeric golden milk every night showed 53% less retinal damage than the control group. 53. That's the difference between reading your grandchild's birthday card and having someone read it to you. The trick is bioavailability. On its own, curcumin is shy. It passes through the gut like a tourist who forgets to tip. But pair it with black pepper and a little healthy fat, and absorption rockets 2,000%. Suddenly, every sip is a targeted delivery straight to the leaking vessels. The pepper's piperine opens the door, the fat escorts curcumin across the blood, retina barrier. Together they mop up inflammatory proteins, seal vessel walls, and even keep sugar from gumming up the lens into diabetic cataracts. Here's how to turn your evening cocoa into medicine. Warm 8 ounces of full-fat coconut milk to 160 degrees, hot to the touch, but not simmering. Add 1 teaspoon of turmeric powder, a 1/4 teaspoon of fresh ground black pepper, half a teaspoon of cinnamon for warmth, and the tiniest pinch of cayenne to wake up circulation. Whisk for 2 full minutes until the liquid turns the color of a desert sunrise. Take it off the heat. Let it cool a minute. Then stir in 1 teaspoon of raw honey. Heat kills honey's enzymes. So patience here is part of the prescription. Sip it 30 minutes before bed. Slowly, like you're savoring the last light of day. Meet David, 73. Retired accountant from Phoenix, Arizona. When he first came to see me, his A1C hovered at 8R, and his retinal photographs looked like a crime scene leaking vessels. Swelling, cotton wool spots. His ophthalmologist had scheduled monthly injections and warned that blindness was likely within 5 years. David's hands shook as he showed me a blurry photo of his daughter's wedding. "I want to see my grandkids grow up," he whispered. David promised me 4 months. Every night he whisked his golden milk while his wife set out tomorrow's coffee cups. Week 8. The swelling on his scans had visibly shrunk. Week 12. His endocrinologist called with new lab results, A1C down to 6. Bah. The lowest in a decade. At 4 months, the retinal specialist stared at the before and after images and asked, "What injection are you getting?" David smiled and said, "Milk and spices." "Doc." Every night. The injections were canceled. David still keeps the cancellation letter in his Bible, right at the verse about light overcoming darkness. Last Thanksgiving, he sent me a new photo, the whole family around the table. David holding his newborn granddaughter, eyes locked on hers, both of them glowing in the candlelight. On the back he wrote, "I see every eyelash. Thank you for giving me. Decades I thought were lost." That's what golden milk does. It doesn't just cool inflammation. It hands parents and grandparents the gift of watching their legacy unfold in high definition. And if turmeric can seal leaking vessels, wait until you taste the water that once helped Cleopatra keep her palace lit by starlight alone. Let me take you back to a spice route that started 3,000 years ago, when traders carried little silk pouches of bright yellow powder across deserts and mountains because kings and queens believed it could keep their eyes as sharp as their crowns. They called it turmeric. And the golden milk they stirred it into wasn't just a bedtime ritual, it was insurance against the slow dimming that comes with power, with age, with life. Modern science has finally caught up with the caravan, and what they found in that yellow dust is a compound called curcumin that walks into your retina and flips the off switch on the very protein that tells blood vessels to leak and swell. That protein has a mouthful of a name, nuclear factor kappa B, but think of it as the arsonist diabetes sends to burn holes in your vision. Curcumin doesn't shout, it simply walks in, turns the key, and the fire dies. University of Texas researchers watched it happen in 280 diabetic seniors. Half drank golden milk every night, half stuck with their usual routine. A year later, the golden milk group showed 53% less retinal damage. 53. That's the difference between watching your granddaughter blow out birthday candles and listening to someone describe the smoke. The secret nobody prints on the spice jar is bioavailability. Curcumin is stubborn. On its own, 90% slips through your gut unused. But give it a pinch of black pepper and a splash of healthy fat, and absorption soars. 2,000%. The piperine in pepper opens the gate. The fat escorts curcumin straight to the bloodstream and across the blood-retina barrier. Suddenly, every swallow is a targeted repair crew, sealing cracks before they become canyons. Here's how to turn your evening into medicine without a single pill. Pour 8 ounces of full-fat coconut milk into a small saucepan and warm it to 160 degrees, hot enough to melt the spices, gentle enough to keep the nutrients alive. Add 1 teaspoon of turmeric powder, a 1/4 teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper, half a teaspoon of cinnamon for warmth, and the tiniest pinch of cayenne to wake up circulation. Whisk steadily for 2 full minutes until the liquid turns the color of a desert sunrise at dawn. Take it off the heat. Let it cool for a minute. Then stir in 1 teaspoon of raw honey. Heat destroys honey's enzyme. So patience here is part of the prescription. Sip it 30 minutes before bed. Slowly, letting the warmth settle in your chest like a promise kept. Meet David, 73. Retired accountant from Phoenix, Arizona. When he first sat across from me, his retinal scans looked like a war zone leaking vessels. Swelling, cotton wool spots, blooming like storm clouds. His A1C sat at 8. R. And his ophthalmologist had scheduled monthly injections with a quiet warning. Blindness is likely within 5 years. David's hands trembled as he showed me a wedding photo of his daughter. The bride's face was a soft blur. "I want to see my grandkids grow up," he said, voice barely above a whisper. David promised me 4 months. Every night he whisked his golden milk while his wife laid out tomorrow's coffee cups, the soft clink of the spoon becoming their new lullaby. Week 8. The swelling on his scans had visibly receded. Week 12. His endocrinologist called with lab results. A 1C down to 6. Bah. The lowest in 15 years. At 4 months, the retinal specialist stared at the before and after images, then at David, then back at the images. "What injection are you getting?" David smiled and said. "Milk and spices, Doc. Every night." The injections were canceled. David still keeps the cancellation letter tucked inside his Bible. Right at the verse about light overcoming darkness. Last Thanksgiving, he sent me a new photo, the whole family around the table. David cradling his newborn granddaughter, eyes locked on hers, both of them glowing in the candlelight. On the back he wrote, "I see every eyelash. Thank you for giving me decades I thought were lost." That's what golden milk does. It doesn't just cool the fire. It hands parents and grandparents the gift of watching their legacy unfold in high definition. And if turmeric can seal a leaking retina, wait until you taste the water that once helped Cleopatra keep her palace lit by starlight alone. We're down to the final three. My friend? And I can feel the excitement humming like the last stretch of a marathon. These aren't just drinks, they're the heavy hitters that left researchers speechless and gave patients back years they thought were gone forever. Let's move quickly, because the stories behind them deserve every second of daylight. Number 3 is saffron water. The crimson threads that once cost more than gold and still carry a whisper of Cleopatra's palace. 5 delicate red stigmas. No more. No less go into 4 ounces of room temperature water and soak for 4 quiet hours. Then you add another 4 ounces of warm water, never hotter than 100 degrees, and drink it right before bed. University of Sydney researchers watched 100 seniors follow this ritual for 6 months. On average, they climbed 2 full lines on the eye chart, the difference between squinting at the menu and reading the fine print on the dessert card. The crocin and crocetine in saffron dilate the microscopic blood vessels feeding your photoreceptors, flooding them with oxygen and pushing back the slow starvation that age brings. One patient, a retired art teacher, sent me a painting of her garden at dusk. The colors were so vivid, I could almost smell the roses. Number 2 takes us to the forbidden palaces of Imperial China, where wolfberry and chrysanthemum tea was tested on prisoners for decades before an emperor dared sip it. 1 tablespoon of dried wolfberries different from goji. More potent, plus 6 dried chrysanthemum flowers. Steep in 8 ounces of 185-degree water for 20 minutes. Add a teaspoon of raw honey and drink an hour before bed. A 2-year Chinese study of 1,000 seniors showed a 71% drop in glaucoma risk. The luteolin in chrysanthemum keeps the eye's drainage system clear. The zeaxanthin dipalmitate in wolfberries builds a rock-solid shield. Richard, 76. Retired pilot from Seattle. Walked in with pressure at 28 and a surgery date circled in red. 6 months later, the pressure sat at 19. The surgeon canceled the operation, and Richard's peripheral vision expanded 15 degrees. He could finally see his wife's smile from the corner of his eye again. And now, the one we've all been waiting for, number 1. The drink that made NASA scientists triple-check their equipment because the results looked like science fiction: tart cherry juice with astaxanthin. The cosmic radiation shield developed to protect astronauts' eyes in space. Astaxanthin is 6,000 times stronger than vitamin C, 550 times stronger than vitamin E, and it's the only antioxidant that crosses the blood-retina barrier in both directions, guarding every layer of your eye around the clock. Combine it with tart cherry's natural melatonin, the highest of any food, and you trigger the deepest repair cycles during slow-wave sleep. Here's the exact recipe. Pour 8 ounces of pure tart cherry juice, not from concentrate, into a glass. Add 4 milligrams of natural astaxanthin from Hawaiian microalgae. Synthetic won't do. Stir in 1 tablespoon of MCT oil to boost absorption 400%. Drink it 1 hour before bed, right as the house settles into quiet. A Macular Disease Society study followed 450 seniors for 8 months. 92% improved contrast sensitivity. 87% gained depth perception. 79% kissed eye strain goodbye. And hold your breath, 43% dropped at least 1 diopter off their prescription. 43%. That's the difference between legally blind and reading the newspaper. Let me tell you about George. 81. Retired engineer from Cleveland, Ohio. When he first came to see me, his vision tested 20/200 legally blind, despite the thickest lenses money could buy. Advanced cataracts. Severe dry macular degeneration. Drusen deposits like yellow gravel across both retinas. His doctors had delivered the verdict, nothing left but waiting for total darkness. George promised me 10 months. Every night, he mixed his cherry red elixir while his daughter set the breakfast table for the next day. Month 4. He noticed the porch light had edges again. Month 7. He recognized his neighbor's dog from across the street. At 10 months, his vision tested 20/80. He could read large print, navigate the house without a cane, and most precious, see his great-granddaughter's face when she was born last spring. The cataract progression stopped cold. The drusen began to dissolve. His ophthalmologist still keeps George's scans on the office wall with a post-it that reads, "Explain this." George sent me a video last week. He's sitting on his porch at dusk, holding the baby, pointing out the first firefly of summer. His voice cracks when he says, "Doctor, Hope, I thought I'd never see magic again. These 8 drinks aren't random, they're a ladder. Each rung lifting your eyes a little higher while you sleep. And the view from the top is the one you've been missing. So tell me in the comments tonight, which one will you try first? And what's the one face, the one moment you're determined to see clearly? Again, I'm heading there right now to read every word. I'm back in my old rocking chair now. To the same one my patients have spilled tears and laughter into for decades. The mug is empty, but my heart is full. 8 simple drinks. 8 quiet miracles, and every one of them waiting in your kitchen tonight. Think about it. While the world sleeps, your eyes are begging for repair. Will you hand them processed sugar and screen glare? Or a cup of healing that costs pennies and takes 3 minutes to stir? These aren't potions from a fairy tale. They're science wrapped in warmth, working while you dream. Green tea to slow cataracts. Bilberry to light up the night. Tart cherry to hand you back hope in a glass. Pick one. Just one. Start there. Let it be the first gentle promise you keep to the eyes that have carried you this far. Now, before the credits roll and the lights come up, I need to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me which drink will you try tonight, and what's the one thing the sunset, the tiny print you're determined to see clearly. Again, I'm 86. And if these hands can still brew tea at 10 o'clock, yours can too. If you believe vision can get better after 60, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm to carry this hope to someone else who's been told it's too late. Subscribe. And every Tuesday you'll find a new science-backed tip waiting in your inbox. Share this with the friend who's given up on driving after dark. The sister who hides her reading glasses in shame. Tell them, Dr. Hope says the story isn't over. This is Dr. B. Hope, signing off with a full heart and eyes that still catch every firefly. I'll see you in the comments and in your clearer tomorrow. Good night. My friend, sleep well. And let the healing begin.